our southern border. It is lawless. It is porous. It is effectively open. Some folks are going down there to tell us what's actually happening. One of them joins us now, Ivory Hecker. She is an independent journalist. She spent most of last week doing journalism down at the border, telling us what's going on. Ivory, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So what did you see? Tell us what's going on right now. You speak to Border Patrol. You speak to people that are trying to help out the Border Patrol. What are they saying about the current state of security and the rule of law down there?
Well, it's a constant stream of migrants going swimming through the Rio Grande. They told me I shadowed a local militia group for 3 days this past week. And turns out while I was there, media reports of 4 people ended up drowning in the Rio Grande. I got tipped off about a 4-year-old girl drowning while attempting to swim across with her family. And Border Patrol confirmed that to me. And she ended up being one of 4. But first day there, when we drove up to the Rio Grande in Maverick County, Texas, we couldn't even get out of the truck before there were already migrants swimming across. So we just turned on our cameras, started rolling. I put all the footage on YouTube and watched this group of about 6 people swim across the Rio Grande. When they got on shore, they said that they had come from Cuba. They had spent a month traveling from Cuba. And it's really interesting that the girl who drowned was from Nicaragua. Turns out another little boy drowned the week I was there. He was from Uruguay, which is way down in South America, southern hemisphere. So people, the word is out that if you want to get into the United States, you go to Mexico and then you swim across and make your way right in.
Ivory, do we have any idea what percentage of people that are trying to cross the border we actually apprehend or come in contact with at all? In other words, you're down at the border. I know it's difficult, and we have a lot of people working on the border who feel disrespected in the Biden administration in general. But what kind of odds do you have of getting across without any sort of significant interaction with American Border Patrol at all?
Well, the border is so long that there's no telling how many people are honestly getting right through without even being detected. So, when you look at CBP data, it shows that more than 2 million people were encountered attempting to cross the border last year. But in a percentage of those people were sent back, a percentage of them were accepted into the U.S., but how many were not encountered? And that's what we just
It's a monster number, right?
Know.
That we never interact with at all, Buck, right?
Oh, there's tens of thousands of gotaways from when I've spoken to Border Patrol that are every month coming into the country, meaning they're never even apprehended. They just run into the country. The numbers we see about encounters and what Ivory's talking about, people that are coming across and Border Patrol is apprehending them, that's one number. But the gotaways is why it's 1.6 million apprehensions last year. When you add the gotaways, it's basically 2 million people entered the United States illegally. We're speaking to Ivory Hecker, who's an independent journalist who was just down at the border last week. ivoryhecker.com is her website. You can check out the video of exactly what's going on down there. Ivory, I haven't spoken to Border Patrol about this in person in almost a year now. I was down there last March. The morale at the start of the Biden administration was low. When you spoke to Border Patrol last week, what were they telling you? And do they feel like the federal government is even backing them up when it comes to getting their jobs done?
Well, when I talked to them, I talked to a couple of agents who were just there. They're not allowed to speak to media at all, but they were very nonchalant about accepting these guys. And when the Cubans swam through the river, border agents walked right up with plastic bags, handing plastic bags. It was a routine. It just seemed very routine to these guys to accept these migrants and give them plastic bags for their wet clothes.
So they're like
and
they're like the welcoming committee now, basically. You cross the Rio Grande illegally, and there's like a federal taxpayer-funded welcoming committee for you now.
Exactly, and the militia was joking the whole time that these guys are called the Uber for migrants now, because it's not as if they're not really hired to keep people out anymore at this point. I mean, a lot of migrants know that they should run right into the arms of Border Patrol at this point, because they will indeed get filed onto a warm van and sent off to a station where they have a good chance of remaining in the U.S. And if they do get sent back across the border, they can just try again. But nothing bad's going to happen to them if they get caught by Border Patrol. A lot of these guys are learning. So, but it was interesting to me in those 3 days, I never saw Border Patrol agents out there in action, chasing after migrants. I did see the Texas National Guard dispatched by Governor Abbott. Those guys were sprinting at times, trying to chase down some of these migrants. Border Patrol was nowhere to be seen in regards to that. They would mosey up and hand plastic bags to migrants who'd swum across. But I wasn't seeing that. When I was there several months ago, Border Patrol had a lot of buses that they were filing migrants onto and taking to Catholic Charities. Then I watched Catholic Charities give plane tickets to the migrants to head in further into the U.S. So it's just a very strange scenario, and I think that's why we see Border Patrol's morale plummeting, because they're sitting there questioning whether, why are we called Border Patrol and why are we believed to be protecting the border when the people on the ground are seeing us and calling us Uber, because that's what they seem to be doing now.
Ivory, what do we know about fentanyl and other drugs crossing the border? Obviously, part of this major issue, huge part of it, is people, but also the drug trade is coming across the border in massive numbers, I believe. What did you hear about that?
Yeah, shadowing the border, the militia, they were always on the lookout for drugs. They said that sometimes the little bags, you'd see a lot of bags around the border, and some of them would have migrants' belongings in them, but some of them would be disguised as migrants' belongings, but they would actually be drugs. Like at one point, the militia was cracking open cans of tuna. There was a bag with food in it, but they said previously they had encountered a bag of food, and when they opened the containers of food, it was straight drugs. So they were, part of the militia's job was just going through what is left there and making sure none of it is drugs, because that is such an issue.
IvoryHecker.com for more of Ivory's reporting from down on the border. Ivory, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's all on YouTube. I put the coverage of the border on YouTube.
Oh, fantastic!
Thanks
Go check it out.
me.
What's your YouTube channel?
Just search Ivory Hecker.
All righty, there we go. Thank you, Ivory.
We are joined now by Gordon Chang. He's an author and analyst. His latest article is at Newsweek. It's China's behind-the-scenes role in the Ukraine war, and he has got a book out, The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. That is Gordon Chang.
They're both out, and they're excellent. I have read them. I highly recommend them.
There you go. Both of them out and ready to be grabbed. You can see clayandbuck.com. We've got links to both on our website. Gordon, appreciate you joining us. What is going on? Big picture question here. What is going on behind the scenes as it pertains to the relationship between Russia and China, and how is it setting a precedent potentially in Ukraine for what might happen going forward, both in Taiwan and around the world, based on what I think it's fair to call an unholy alliance between these two countries?
Oh, it certainly is an unholy alliance, and Beijing is supporting Vladimir Putin pretty much to the hilt. You know, we hear a lot about how Chinese officials, and they're usually mid to lower level ones, express concern about China's support for Vladimir Putin. But these guys don't have any power. The guy who does have power, Xi Jinping, the ruler, is fully supporting the Russian war effort. And they're doing that in a number of ways. There are these enhanced commodity purchases, oil, gas, wheat, coal, but also it's China's making its financial system available to Russian institutions that have been kicked out of SWIFT, have their dollar accounts frozen. Also, China's made its diplomats at the service of the Kremlin. And this is something which we often overlook, but China's propaganda machine is all in for the ludicrous, absurd notions that Russia is trying to propagate. So this is an effort where Beijing is fully behind the Russians.
Gordon, how should the Biden administration approach China on these issues? I mean, there have been some long talks, as I understand it, already between intermediaries of the U.S. State Department, the Chinese Communist Party. What is realistic? I mean, right now we hear from whether it's the West Wing or from the State Department spokespersons, we hear them saying, well, we're telling China how awful the humanitarian situation is in Ukraine. That doesn't feel like it's going to get the Chinese Communist Party to act. What leverage do we have, and what should we do with China?
The leverage that we have is to freeze the dollar accounts of Chinese institutions. I mean, that would actually get China's attention because probably it would lead to a failure of the Chinese financial system, the Chinese economy, and maybe even the Communist Party itself. So that would get their attention. And I think that that's what we should do because Beijing is, as we just discussed, all in for the war effort, which means that China supported the killing of pregnant mothers and also their children. This is really horrible, and you're right. Trying to play to the humanitarian instincts of Chinese leaders never work because these guys are happy to kill millions. And in fact, Xi Jinping has killed millions by spreading COVID-19 beyond his borders. That's more than 6 million people outside of China have been killed by a disease which should never have escaped the central portion of that country.
Gordon, and I'm glad you brought that up. China is still trying to adopt a COVID zero policy when it appears the rest of the world has given up on that idea. What is the impact of COVID still likely to be in China? They've now locked down tens of millions of people. The price of oil has dropped precipitously after surging, partly because the idea is that they're not going to be able to consume as much oil as maybe was anticipated. What's going on with COVID zero? Can China continue to have that as a goal given the rapid proliferation of the Omicron variant?
Yeah, 37 million people locked down. Large portions of the economy just have been shut. And the reason why Beijing does this has nothing to do with disease. It's because the spread of the disease is a threat to the Communist Party. The party has made its control of COVID-19 a matter of legitimacy. They did that in around March of 2020 when they were criticizing democracies like ours for not being able to control the disease. And they said it was a failure of democratic governance and that their communist totalitarianism was superior when it came to disease control. So now you have these diseases raging in China. And in the United States and elsewhere, you basically, life is returning to normal. So the Communist Party views this as a mortal threat.
Gordon Chang, everybody. You're speaking to him about what's going on with China and Russia in the situation right now. Go to GordonGChang.com for more of his analysis. You can also follow him on Twitter. Gordon, are we seeing something of a realignment in your view here, or just perhaps a strengthening of one that already existed between China, Russia, and a changing of the global financial world order? Wall Street Journal reporting just earlier this morning that Saudi Arabia is now thinking about changing its sale of oil to China so that it would be denominated in yuan instead of dollars. This seems like a pretty big development considering that people have been worried about the reserve status of U.S. currency for a long time.
Yes, I worry a lot about China. That's one thing I do not worry about. I mean, China today accounts for under 5% of global payments, which has basically stayed the same for a very long time, while people has worried about this. Now, of course, if Saudi Arabia started accepting renminbi for oil, that would change that. But the renminbi can't challenge the dollar for about 3 reasons. First of all, it's not convertible on a capital account, and it's barely convertible on a current account as a practical matter. You then also have the Chinese central bank is not trusted to administer the currency fairly, which is what you need for a global reserve currency. Also, to have a global reserve currency, you have to have a lot of that currency outside your country. To do that, you have to run persistent current or capital account deficits. China runs surpluses and has to do that in order to defend its system. So, the Chinese can talk about this all the time. China's friends on Wall Street can talk about this all the time. But until China makes this currency convertible, it just ain't going to happen.
Gordon, there's been a lot of reporting about, we started off talking about the unholy alliance between Russia and China. And there has been reporting that China was aware of what was going on in terms of the invasion of Ukraine, and that Vladimir Putin, because we saw them together, Chairman Xi and Vladimir Putin at the Beijing Olympics, that there may have been an agreement not to invade until the Olympics were over in China. Do you believe that China was intimately aware of the plans associated for the invasion of Ukraine, that they were held back by the Olympics? And if so, what does this further say about China's role in this invasion?
China, I think, did know about the plans and did prevail upon Vladimir Putin to delay the invasion. Remember, the Olympics ended February 20, and Putin invaded February 24th. You're referring to New York Times reporting, which is credible. And this corresponds to other things that we know about the relationship between China and Russia during that period. So I think that we have to assume that China was in on the invasion planning.
Gordon Chang, everybody, GordonGChang.com. Follow him on Twitter. Gordon, thanks so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
We have our friend Jesse Kelly with us. He is nationally syndicated by Premier Radio Networks. I'm sure you are familiar with his show. His Twitter account is also a source of amusement for many across the country. Mr. Jesse, good to have you on, sir.
Oh, well, it's an honor to be on the biggest show in the country, and I know you're honored to have me as well.
As always, sir, as always. So, Jesse, I want to start with the Biden White House for a second. Joe Biden's supposed to be heading to Europe, they're saying. Kamala's already been over there. Joe Biden is supposed to be heading to Europe, I believe, next week is what's being talked about right now, as if that is something that is supposed to make us feel better about the situation. I mean, I see everything from Biden these days through this lens of I am angry but not surprised that they put this individual in a position where when things really get tough and rough, we see it was reckless. It was insane to make this guy the president of the United States.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, Buck. As soon as I heard that this morning, I got legitimately worried. I mean, beyond the normal, you and I get to laugh on the radio, being Clayton, we'll yuck it up over about what an idiot he is. It is legitimately a concern to have this president personally reveal how feeble and not doing well he is to other parts of the world. It's not a stretch to say all the bad guys are on the move right now because they look at the half-functional human being in the White House. I do not want him presenting himself in person to other people. He is not doing well. His mouth hangs open. It looks like he's half asleep. He does that stiff-armed walk, and everybody who's looked into it knows exactly what that means. Well, what are these guys going to think when they meet that guy in person? They're going to think we are pathetic and not going to do anything.
Jesse, this is much less serious, but I saw this and I thought, I bet you have a take on it. Buck and I were talking about it off air. Did you see where Elon Musk challenged Vladimir Putin to basically a trial by combat, Game of Thrones style, which I love? But one, Putin is 69 years old, but he's only 5'7". What percentage of Americans do you think Putin could defeat in a trial by combat, basically, with his background? And who would be the best American to pick right now if we had a legitimate Game of Thrones trial by combat style? Who would you go with?
Obviously, we'd have to try to stay in the same age range, I would say, Clay. There's no question about it. The thing about Putin is everyone talks about him, with his KGB background, and they'll bring up the judo thing.
Yes.
Well, you don't know how good the guy is at judo. Obviously, if you didn't give the guy a black belt, all of a sudden you're going to be found hanging from your belt in the shower. So, of course, he's going to be given it. You don't know that he knows anything. I don't know that I buy into this Vladimir
Do you think
Putin.
you could beat Putin in a trial by combat? You yourself, you're a big guy, you were a Marine, or do you think he would beat you?
I would pummel that tiny little tyrant into a bloody pulp and enjoy every single second. But again, I'm 40. That's more of an age thing than anything else. If we're let's see. You know what? I bet this would be a good match. I'd like to see Putin versus Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is a little chubby. He's a friend of mine, but so I can say that he's a little chubby. He's a little younger. But probably not what you'd consider some kind of martial arts master. Putin versus Cruz would be like a celebrity boxing match I'd show up for. If we're talking about fight to the death, then we better pick one of the Democrats because, look, they're more happy murdering people than people on the right.
Speaking of Jesse Kelly, syndicated radio host and apparently analyst of combatives and mixed martial arts on the side as well. Jesse, How do you think we're handling? I mean, sorry, I was going to pivot back to a serious thing here for a second, because I've been worried all along that what's going to happen is in the early days of the conflict in Ukraine, there would be everyone, well, not everybody, but a lot of people would say, "Oh, you're right. This is not our fight. We've been through too many wars already." And then the videos would come out, and then the pounding of the cities would occur with artillery and rockets. And now it sounds you got Zelensky going around to Canada. To their parliament, and tomorrow speaking to the U.S. Congress, straight up saying we want a no-fly zone. We want you guys in on this. Are you confident that that's not going to happen? Because I'm starting to think that it's just a matter of time before enough people say, "Oh, we have to do this," without thinking about what doing this would really mean.
No, I'm not confident it's not going to happen because the tail wags the dog now constantly. We've become a society, well, the world is, not just America. We've become a society that is, honestly, it's run by social media. And people can say, well, most people aren't on Twitter, and that's true. Yeah, but the people who make the decisions are on Twitter, and they live on Facebook and Instagram, and they do run foreign policy based on sad videos they see online. And that's part of the reason we are so mixed up now is emotion governs everything. It doesn't matter if you're solidly in the no-fly zone camp right now. One video comes out tonight. It could happen 15 minutes from now. It could happen while we're sitting here talking. One video comes out of some bombed-out kid's hospital or orphanage, and they haul some dead kid out in Ukraine, and you'd have 70% to 80% of U.S. soccer moms in this country beating down their congressman's door to go invade Ukraine. That's how we run now, and it's a very, very dangerous place to be. And back to what we talked about in the beginning, the stopgap for that is the doddering old fool currently masquerading as president of the United States. So he's not going to be able to withstand that kind of pressure if it comes down on him. He doesn't have the strength for it.
It is amazing you mentioned that, Jesse, because, and Buck and I were talking about this off the air too, the number of people that are willing to withstand 24 hours of bad news in order to make the right decision is almost non-existent. Everybody is so afraid of that social media mob coming after them. And I think you can draw a direct analogy. Look, the George Floyd incident and its aftermath. We decided to have a legitimate debate in this country. We really did, over defund the police. Black Lives Matter basically became a sainted organization that had every major company in America genuflecting at their altar. And the natural result of that, and now people don't even want to acknowledge it, was thousands of people died who would otherwise be alive of violent crime because we took away police officers and their ability to implement the actual law and protect people. How do we get back to not allowing emotion on social media to dictate every response? Or are we so far gone, it's impossible to hope that could ever reverse itself?
I'm known as a pessimist or maybe a bit of a cynic. I do have a hopeful take on that, Clay, because everything you just said is correct. However, on a macro level, I think we have to acknowledge that social media is still fairly new. And so what we're having a hard time doing as a society, whole countries are having a hard time doing this. We're having a hard time adjusting to something I call the nuclear news cycle, where the bad part about where we live now because of social media is it burns really, really, really hot for 24 hours. And I've been underneath so many of these, more than I can possibly count. For 24 hours, it's not just your enemies coming for you. Your mom read about it on Facebook. Oh, no, your sister saw something on Twitter.
Yes.
Did you hear what they're saying? It's your friends who are coming at you. For a 24-hour period, you feel like the entire world is coming down on you. But there's a good side to that. It only lasts 24 hours because there's always a new story, always a new scandal. People just breeze right along from gigantic stories like they're nothing. If you can just withstand 24 hours, keep your head down, shut your freaking mouth, you'll end up being fine. And I think societies haven't adjusted that way yet. CEOs haven't, politicians haven't, regular people have not. We've not adjusted to the nuclear news cycle, but it is so new. I think we need time to adjust.
Jesse, you probably have seen there's a lot of, whether it's members of Congress, Democrats, obviously, although I think one or two Republicans actually as well, although they're the Republicans who spend all their time bashing Republicans, referring to people that are trying to look at all aspects of either U.S. intervention or what led up to the invasion of Ukraine and throwing the word treason around. I mean, notably, you have sitting senators saying Tucker Carlson's guilty of treason. You had the idiots on The View saying that he should be investigated by the Department of Justice, which I think we have to take somewhat seriously insofar as the Biden regime will tell social media companies to shut people down for their wrongthink. So, I mean, what are we to make of the fact that people who are now opposing military intervention in a country in which we are not at war and do not have a critical national security interest are being called traitors by the apparatus?
Well, we're to make of it that they're telling us how they really feel. This is not. Sometimes I get frustrated with people on the right because they still want to live in this pie in the sky world where we just, we could have a disagreement between the right and the left, and let's sit down and have a discussion. No. That's 20 years ago. The people on the left in this country are happy to have you dead right now. They're happy to have you arrested. An uncomfortably high percentage of your fellow Americans would happily have you thrown in jail or shot for what you believe. I know people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to acknowledge that. That makes people uncomfortable. Why do you think the mask slips so often? How often do you see a major media figure, let alone just, the normal Joe on Facebook, how often do you see a major media figure or political figure either celebrate the death of someone on the right or wish for the death or wish for their arrest? It's all the time. It's all the time because that's how they think. They're not liberals now. They are full-blown communists, and communists believe in murdering as many people as they have to accomplish their goals. It is a sick, evil religion of destruction, and that is hard for people to accept because you don't want to look at your neighbor across the street that way. But if your neighbor across the street has a Biden sign in the yard and go green this and all that other stuff, I got news for you. Your neighbor across the street would turn you into the DOJ to have you thrown in a dark hole without a moment of hesitation. That's reality.
We're talking to Jesse Kelly. After that dark analogy, I've got a positive story here to close with, Jesse. Your boy Buck, my co-host here, has just filled out his first NCAA tournament bracket ever. Now, we were having dinner down in Houston when I told you this, and you were in as much disbelief as I was. And by the way, a couple of people who also work on the show had never filled out a bracket. This blew my mind. Does this blow your mind as much as it does mine?
I don't honestly. We tried to pick Buck's brain about it that night when we were sitting down for dinner. I still didn't get a good explanation how that's possible. I mean, that is something that Buck has been CIA. He's been around the block. He's been around the world. No one ever handed you a bracket, Buck, and said
they didn't have a CIA bracket challenge. Like there was never one in the office. Like nobody was doing this. Was it not allowed?
Just involved which countries were going to have governments that fell. There was no. There was no sports.
He's picked Villanova, by the way, Jesse. Have you done a bracket? Do your kids do a bracket? I've got my kids filling it. We have a family bracket challenge. You guys do this?
We have a family bracket challenge, and on the line is somebody gets to pick all the entertainment options for that night, which whoever in the family wins gets to pick the entertainment options. And I have a son who loves the worst board games in the world. We're all just praying he doesn't win. Otherwise, we're toast.
What is the worst board game in the world?
There's a Jaws board game. I can't explain it on the radio. It's the most atrocious, complicated thing. So you could say Jaws, or you could say a classic like Monopoly or Risk. We play those all the time as a family, but they always end in a family fight. Every
They
time
also
there's
never
an
end.
They never end, and when they finally end, everyone hates each other. So those are probably the top ones.
Outstanding stuff. Jesse Kelly, his show 6 to 9 p.m. on many of these same premier stations. Appreciate you, my man.
Be good.
Thanks,
boys.
Jesse. We're joined now, as we said we would be, by psychologist Marty McDonald. He is the author of United States of Fear, How America Fell Victim to a Mass Delusional Psychosis. Dr. McDonald, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. I am a medical doctor, so I'm a psychiatrist, not a psychologist.
Oh, well, there we go. I'm glad we called you doctor, because that one would definitely be true.
Yes.
So,
No,
Dr.
all
McDonald,
the time.
tell us, sir, what is a mass delusional psychosis, and how did this happen?
So a mass delusional psychosis, which I began speaking about way back in summer of 2020, and then ultimately wrote a book about it called United States of Fear this past October, is essentially an entire society, meaning the United States, although this extends obviously beyond the U.S., all deciding to go crazy at the same time, meaning that they stop thinking rationally. And we know this from just looking out of our windows in our homes and our cars and seeing people walking, driving, biking by themselves, wearing 1, 2, 3 masks, face shields, gloves, shutting down schools for children who really have no business being at home because their job is to be at school and they're completely safe at school, shutting down businesses, people not wanting to go into elevators when other people for over a year and a half. This is not rational thinking. And it's not one person, it's not 20, it's an entire country of people all doing it at the same time. And that's why I called it mass delusional psychosis.
Dr. McDonald, is this more of an issue in your experience for children or adults? Who has a harder time grappling with these rules and what the impact might be going ahead?
Well, the children would have been fine if we had just left them alone.
Yeah.
But children take their cues from adults, and they also take their cues from other kids. And when adults tell children, it is too scary and too dangerous for you to go to your friend's house for a sleepover, or too dangerous for you to walk to school by yourself without wearing a bunch of masks on your face, and it's too dangerous for you to visit grandma because she might die if you breathe on her, that wrecks a children's psychology. That makes a child believe that his simple presence, the regular activities of his day-to-day life, going to school, visiting with friends, seeing grandma, are now no longer safe or appropriate. And then what happens 2 years later? We tell them, guess what? Everything's fine now. You don't have to do any of that. The child is completely confused. He's now been conditioned to think that he's a danger to society. He's not going to be able to let that go. Witness today. First day back at school in Los Angeles County, all the children were told you don't have to wear masks indoors. The front page article, LA Times, says, no more masks in schools, but 85% of all children continue to wear them. Why is that?
Outrageous. We're talking to psychiatrist Mark McDonald. He's the author of United States of Fear, How America Fell Victim to a Mass Delusional Psychosis. Dr. McDonald is, and excuse us here because, obviously we don't have medical backgrounds. I'm wondering, though, if this is in the psychiatric literature? I mean, this notion of a mass delusional psychosis, for a time, the term that was being used among some in the media was mass formation psychosis. Is this well studied? I mean, where could people learn more about this? Is this talked about in psychiatric circles? I'm just wondering what the clinical diagnosis of this would be.
Well, you're referring to a kind of jumbling together of two phrases, which is mass delusional psychosis and also mass formation, the latter of which was coined by a psychologist in Belgium a year or two ago named Matthias Desmet. And then Robert Malone popularized the combination of those two by calling it mass formation psychosis. But the word formation really just means psychosis, according to this Belgian psychologist. So mass formation psychosis is just mass psychosis. It's just repeating the same word twice. But it means the same thing that I mean when I say mass delusional psychosis. And the expression, the idea, has been around for quite a long time. This isn't the first time that this has happened. Look at the Salem witch trials. That was a mass delusional psychosis. In Europe, many women were executed in almost every village in multiple countries throughout Europe because they were called witches. And this was insanity on a social level, on a citywide level. It happened in Northern Europe during the 1600s with the tulip craze. Everybody thought tulips were suddenly worth millions of dollars, and they invested in them only to see themselves bankrupted 6 months later when the market crashed. People get whipped up into frenzies all of the time throughout history in different countries. What's different about this is that it happened around the entire world. It wasn't just one town, one city, one state, one country. It was worldwide, rich, poor, first world, second world, third world. This is what makes it unique. This is what makes it different from past crises and mass delusional hysterias.
Dr. McDonald, I'm fascinated by that, the historical cogency you just gave us, because sometimes the emotions of the current day can distract and not make people see things rationally. You just mentioned the tulip craze. That market crashed, making people aware, tulips really didn't have the value that we ascribed to them, right? You could say the same thing happened with the subprime mortgage crisis in this country on some level. The great moment in the Michael Lewis book and also the movie where the strippers have multiple homes in Florida, and that's when he, at least in the movie, has a light bulb moment and says, oh my goodness, we're totally in the grips of a delusion as it pertains to housing values. There is a crash in those examples where people can say, oh, we got this wrong. There's a tangible acknowledgement of the wrongness. Well, maybe you can see where I'm going here. Is there any hope of a tangible acknowledgement of the wrongness as it pertains to our response with COVID? And if you don't get that, how do you pull people out of the grips of this mass delusion?
The answer, in a word, is no. And the reason for that is those who have manufactured, who have ginned up, generated, motivated, propagated this mass delusional psychosis, meaning the corrupt politicians, unelected bureaucrats, media, and corporate execs, have no motivation or interest to acknowledge what they've done. None. And witness what we've moved on from one crisis, which was COVID, to the next crisis, which is Ukraine. Why? Nothing changed except the politics. It is a crisis distraction strategy, and it is intentional so that Americans and those around the world do not have to look and feel and act on the suffering that they witness in their day-to-day lives: economic collapse, open borders, drug addiction, fentanyl overdoses, anxiety, depression, suicide, failing schools, crime. All of that gets put on the back burner during a state of crisis. So no, they will not acknowledge it. The only way for us to move forward and get out of this is for individuals, the parents, the friends, the families, people who have taken hold of and been taken hold of fear, become essentially addicted to fear, start to acknowledge that they themselves are hurting each other and themselves by holding on to the fear. And that's why I'm writing a second book right now called Freedom from Fear, a 12-step guide to an individual and national recovery, modeled after AA and Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. We cannot look to the top to correct themselves. We have to look to each other and build up from the bottom to get over this fear addiction and hopefully block the next crisis from taking over our lives.
Psychiatrist Mark McDonald, he has a book out, United States of Fear, How America Fell Victim to a Mass Delusional Psychosis, and another one on the way. And Doc, please come back and talk to us when that one's ready for the folks to hear about it.
I'd love to. Hope to get it out by Easter, perhaps May.
All right, thanks so much.
We are joined now as we roll through the first hour of the Wednesday edition of the program by Dr. Marty Makary of Johns Hopkins University. He's the author of The Price We Pay. He also has got a great piece up, 10 Biggest COVID Mistakes Americans Deserve an Apology from the Medical Experts. It's linked at clayandbuck.com, at foxnews.com. You can check it out there. Dr. Makary, appreciate you joining us. I read your piece this morning. Really well done. What is your take on, we said we were going to talk about it in a little bit, but the Senate actually voted on mask mandates on airplanes, and Mitt Romney was the only Republican. I believe there were 8 different Democratic senators, many of them in tight re-election races, that also voted, 57 total, to do away with the airplane mandate. Why in the world does that mandate still exist? Is it totally and completely illogical?
I think it is. I think that we have now the data that we should have gotten on day one of the pandemic on cloth masks. And really what protects people is the ventilation in the airplane. And some people just don't want to accept that. And if you want to wear a mask forever for the rest of your life, then you'll say we need to wear a mask now because we're at about the lowest numbers we're going to be. We're going to fester at these low numbers off and on forever. People are getting depressed. People they're sad when they're wearing a mask. We're losing the human connection. And we just got data that the isolation that the pandemic has promoted has increased the rates of heart disease and stroke by 30% and increased dementia by 50%. So we got to accept a little bit of risk on COVID to try to alleviate the harm we're seeing outside of COVID.
Wait a second, Dr. Makary, can you just hit that again? Because I hadn't seen or heard that. I think people really do need to hear this. We've seen what percent increases in heart attack and stroke during the pandemic?
Yeah, so this is a study, ironically, that data that came from the CDC. So just recognize the real numbers may be twice as high. But what they reported that the effect of isolation during the pandemic resulted in a 29% increase in heart disease, 32% increase in stroke, and a 50% increase in dementia. People are losing their mind.
So they're locking people away is dramatically increasing their possibility of death from a whole range of factors. That is from the CDC's own data.
That's right. And it's something that scientists are not honest about is that we've lost about 100,000 Americans a year above what we normally lose in our death tolls from non-COVID mortality, what we call excess non-COVID deaths. Nobody's talking about that. That is something that you don't see in Sweden, which, by the way, all in all, has a far lower fatality rate per capita than the United States.
Speaking of Dr. Marty Makary, Dr. Makary, I also want to know what you think when you hear the CEO of Pfizer, Bourla, saying that they're calling for an emergency authorization for a fourth shot, meaning the second booster shot. And even Fauci now says, yeah, it might have to be shots forever. I mean, are these people just utterly shameless? Because I remember when even last summer, when people like me and Clay and others were saying, guys, it's going to be shots for every year for the rest of your life if they get their way with it. I mean, do you feel like there's any contrition from within the medical community, the people that push this kind of stuff and now have realized it wasn't what they said it would be?
Well, a lot of doctors are frustrated that a company executive now is basically taking the functional role as the director of the United States CDC. And Dr. Fauci and Dr. Walensky are playing passive. We started to see that when Omicron came about in South Africa. Walensky and Fauci, the NIH, all took a very passive role. And the companies did the experiments, not the United States laboratories and the government. The companies, the pharma industry, did the experiments and said, we have data telling you that you should get another shot. And they just parroted without seeing the underlying data, just repeated that. A lot of people are frustrated. And I think if it were up to the shareholders of Pfizer, we might be getting a shot every Monday morning when we show up to work.
Dr. Makary, in your 10 things that we got wrong, meaning the public health experts, what do you think was the biggest failure? When I read your list, to me, it's shutting down the schools. Was there a bigger failure in your mind than that?
Well, I'll tell you one that's just close to my heart because I'm a surgeon who has been with people at the end of life at the bedside in the ICU. And the way that we shut out loved ones from saying goodbye to their family members, it was a human rights violation that spanned most of the pandemic, and all the hospitals were complicit as the establishment did nothing. That was one of the most cruel practices this country inflicted on its own citizens.
Dr. Makary, are you having more and more people from within the medical community reach out to you to either, I mean, look, it's at this point even more important, I would think, than them saying you're right, is saying that they will not allow this to happen again. They recognize that masking up between bites on airplanes is a moronic, anti-scientific policy that was instituted, that masking up children in schools was an idiotic, unscientific policy that was really child abuse on a massive scale. I mean, are there other doctors who, we used to have you on, and there were not a lot of you, MDs with real credentials who would come forward and speak obvious truths. Are you going to be the lone man shouting from the mountaintop the next time, Doc, or are there going to be others standing alongside you?
I think a lot of doctors now feel empowered. They've seen that they've got to speak up. I got a lot of secret praise from doctors around the country and a bunch of us who spoke up did, we took a big risk because universities and medical societies, journals bully and threaten people who speak up about their opinion different from the establishment. But we're all proud of our medical profession, and we're seeing our credibility now in the toilet, and that's why doctors are speaking up now, and they're coming around.
I'm reading right now the Washington Post, Dr. Makary. They have a headline, "A COVID surge in Western Europe has U.S. bracing for another wave." Right now, obviously, the numbers are down quite low in the United States as the Omicron variant seems to have burned out. Do you expect to see these continuing waves in the future, maybe even this one connected to Western Europe? There has oftentimes been a connection between what happens in Western Europe and what happens in the United States.
Yeah, the UK has been a pretty reliable preview of what we can expect, and what they're seeing is an uptick. I wouldn't call it a wave. I don't think it's going to be a wave. What they're seeing is that the BA2 sort of second variant version of Omicron is causing some infection out there, even in people who had Omicron in the past. And so what they're noticing is an uptick, especially in the southern region where the vaccination rates in older people may not be those vaccines may not be holding up very well. I think we're going to see ebbs and flows for a long time, and I can guarantee you COVID's going to take a bump up in the fall because it's now one of the regular respiratory viruses we're going to see every winter, every viral season.
Dr. Makary, are you confident that we will never go, and when I say we, I mean anywhere, including places like New York, Los Angeles, we will not go back into lockdown again? Is there a consensus, even if it's a quiet one, on lockdowns were disastrous with little to no benefit?
Unfortunately, I don't think there's a consensus. I mean, look at the study out of Hopkins on lockdowns. It was very elegant, very sophisticated. My colleagues did it, and it was basically blown off by a part of the country that didn't want to hear it. Here we had the largest public health intervention in human history, that is the lockdowns, and people are not even interested in studying the impact of it. There's probably no better comparison than comparing Sweden and Michigan, identical in population, identical in their age and age distribution, yet Sweden had double the deaths of Michigan. We've got to learn our lessons, and unfortunately, I think some parts of the country are not interested in the data.
Dr. Makary, what would you tell us we should know? For everybody out there who is following the storylines, what's next? I mean, today is the anniversary of 15 days to slow the spread. It's now been 730 days, 2 full years, since 15 days to slow the spread. What's next? How does this continue?
Well, I think the thing that we've never accepted as a country, that we still need to accept, is that there is a 1,000 to 10,000-fold difference in the risk to people who are vulnerable and older versus people who are younger and healthier. We've never talked about obesity as a risk factor. We've got to get people active, healthy. We've got to talk about food as medicine, and we've got to start recognizing that risk cannot be eliminated. We've got to learn to live with it because it's going to be here forever, which means every viral season we're going to see a bump up. You got to use common sense precautions. If you're sick, stay home. If you've been exposed, stay your distance. And if you're around someone vulnerable, be careful. That's true of all respiratory pathogens. At this point, influenza is as or more dangerous than COVID, according to the new Financial Times analysis that just came out. We've got to learn to live with all these viral pathogens.
Dr. Marty Makary of Johns Hopkins University Medical Center, author of The Price We Pay. He's got a piece up at clayandbuck.com. 10 biggest COVID mistakes. Americans deserve an apology from the medical experts. Dr. Makary, always appreciate the expertise, sir. Thank you.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks.